player.
Hey, Matt.
Yes. Okay. I think it's recording now. So I guess we're gonna start. It's 8:20 already. I think we have a good crowd here. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here very early and not so early, and impossible for some in other parts of the planet who really it's 3, 4 a.m. in the morning for them. So hopefully next year that is not gonna happen, and we're gonna have a nice in-person with breakfast business meeting. So this is my second year as co-chair with my co-chair Anatoly, who is in Hong Kong 3 a.m. So he excused himself and we said, it's okay, it's okay. But next year, I hope that at least my last year as co-chair, I'm gonna be able to be in person and see you all. So thank you. We wanted to do something different this time. And I'm gonna start by sharing my screen to show you the agenda, and we wanted to really make it more interesting and engaging, and already Jorge helped us really raise the bar with a great present that was not planned, by the way, the music, but it was fabulous. We're gonna have a presentation by Dr. Ree titled "Can Higher Education Address Anti-Asian Racism?" So that's something we wanted to do different this time. And we're gonna have a good 30 minutes, including questions and a discussion with all of you. Then we're gonna have the traditional overview of the CIEG, that it's going strong despite the challenges brought by the pandemic. We're gonna have Rotsi presenting the amazing progress and growth of our journal in the just 2 years that I have been in this role. It is almost like every month there is growth in the journal in many ways, and you will see it, and you will be very pleased to see where we are at right now. We're going to talk about our program for this conference. I hope you have been able to attend to some of the sessions, or all. Our communications initiatives. Hopefully we have a discussion with all of you. And finally, last but not least, we are going to celebrate our awardees. We're very excited about those as always. So with that, I hope everybody's doing good, monitoring the chat, but let's start with our presentation by our guest, Dr. Ree, who is professor of education in Long Island University. And here you can read a little bit. I'm just, it feels silly to me to read it when you can read it in the screen, but I'm just gonna give you a little bit of time for you to read her presentation and about her. We were particularly excited about bringing her because of the current events against the the racist events that we have seen lately against the Asian and the Asian Pacific community. And a lot of the conversation has been about COVID and coping with the pandemic, and the Black Lives Matters movement, but there's also this going on. So anti-AAPI racism in the United States, how can we engage and increase anti-AAPI racism in the United States? It's going to be the topic, and we're very excited about the book that Dr. Ree recently published on decolonial feminism research. So with that, just give you a couple of, or a minute or so for you to read it. So Dr. Ree, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'll let you, please, it's all yours, and welcome to our business meeting.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning, everyone. So before I start, let me also share my screen, which we're gonna take a second. Oops. Do you all see my PowerPoint? Yeah, okay. Great. So I am really grateful and honored to be here. But before my talk, I first specifically thank Dr. Mendoza and the board of directors of the Higher Education Special Interest Group for inviting me to this space and engaging conversation with you all on anti-Asian Pacific Islander racism. As this is an online session, I'm not sure where everyone in the audience is geographically located, but all of us can honor and acknowledge the history of our specific territories and presence of ancestors, especially if we reside in settler colonial territories. For me, I'm residing in the land of Lenape. This recognition is to express our solidarity with Indigenous communities across the globe and reaffirm that anti-oppressive decolonial work involves creative and diverse coalitions and responsibilities. Since I'm working and living in the United States, my talk will center around anti-AAPI racism and violence. And even before I go further, I also acknowledge the tensions and conflicts within this category of AAPI. And in fact, I'll get into some discussions not only on heterogeneity within this social category, but also arbitrariness of the category. At the same time, I still know this increasing visible anti-AAPI racism is not confined to the United States. Across the Anglophone sphere, such as Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United Kingdom, similar forms and degrees of racism against Asian descent, and particularly at this point, who look like East Asians have been reported. I can present all kind of statistics to signify the intensity of current racism, such as since 2012 spring, more than 4,000 incidents of physical assaults, verbal and online harassment, and civil rights violence against Asian Americans have been recorded. An Asian American women are targeted and assaulted 3 times more than men, and many incidents remain unreported. But this time, what I want to bring all of our attention to is that one of the common phenomenon is when this kind of assaults occur, bystanders often do not intervene. The similar indifference have been reported actually across different countries. Most victims share that no one rendered any support, whether assault was physical or verbal. This is a particular manifestation where I ponder deeply about the notion of invisibility as a racialized status of AAPI and complexities of speaking and standing up for Asian Americans. So as noted, my talk is situated in the context of the United States. However, I hope that our conversation today opens up ways that we can examine the issues of anti-Asian racism through global, transnational, comparative, and international approaches to expand our knowledge and understanding. So in the US, AAPI is considered as a category of race through which anyone who's affiliated with the geographical area of Asia and the Pacific Island is perceived to belong to a monolithic group of non-whites, regardless of our vast differences in citizenship, nationality, immigration history, and immigration status, ethnicity, religion, language, gender, sexuality, socioeconomic background, disability, and so on. In the US, for example, there are more than 48 ethnic groups within AAPI. And in fact, if we really look closely into our dynamics, interethnic relationships within AAPI, including historical, geopolitical, and religious conflicts and dynamics, may be as complex as, if not more than, interracial dynamics. But the racializations of AAPI renders these diverse members as a group sharing essential characteristics and often get conflated with people living in the Asian region. Because of this illogical meaning making, some critics even argue to abolish the term Asians, as Asians refer to 4.6 billion people, 60% of the whole world populations. And then they ask if AAPI is a geographical term or racial term by adding questions like if Afghans, Russians, or Persians are Asian. The point here is that in each context of society, in this case, in the United States, we do have a particular historical, political, and socio-cultural process of racialization that shapes and conditions of life for Asian descents to become racially AAPI, and thus the identity is actually political. In other words, oh, sorry, I think I'm a little late here. In other words, unless you're implicated with the United States, I wouldn't even argue US empire state, particularly in the space of citizenship. AAPI as a race does not exist without the state-sponsored racialization that lumps more than 48 different ethnic groups with distinct histories, languages, and cultures and values into one monolithic racial category. Nothing binds AAPI as a common group. AAPI racial identity is nothing more than a political identity, since it is the outcome of white supremacy that continues to fuel racialization process and our responses to it. So here I ask the audience to notice Asian Americans. What do we have to remember and forget at the same time? I'm going to pause a little bit for you to think. To notice AAPI, what do we have to remember and forget at the same time? For me, this is a key methodological question that can expand how we study race and racism. To address this question, I borrowed the concept of rememory from Toni Morrison, an African-American writer who now is in our rememory. In her novel, Beloved, Morrison introduced this concept of rememory as both forgetting and remembrance, and both the verb and noun. I'm gonna read a little rather long dialogue in Beloved between Denver and her mother, Setha, where Setha brings up her memory. And so I'm gonna actually share the text here. It's a rather long, but it's, I think, worth for us to take a moment to actually see how she introduced this concept. So I'm gonna read while you're also reading. What are you praying for, ma'am? What are you praying for, ma'am? Not for anything. I don't pray anymore. I just talk. What are you talking about? You won't understand, baby. Yes, I will. I was talking about time. It's so hard for me to believe in it. Some things go, pass on. Some things just stay. I used to think it was my memory. You know, some things you forget. Other things you never do. But it's not. Places are still there. If a house burns down, it's gone. But the place, the picture of it, stays. And not just in my rememory, but out there in the world. What I remember is a picture floating around out there, outside my head. I mean, even if I don't think it, even if I die, the picture of what I did or knew or saw is still out there, right in the place where it happened. Can other people see it? Asked Denver. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Someday you be walking the road and you hear something or see something going on so clear. And you think it's you thinking a thought picture, but no, it's when you bump into a rememory that belongs to somebody else. Where I was before I came here, that place is real. It's never going away. Even if the whole farm, every tree, grass blade of it dies, the picture is still there. What's more, if you go there, you who never was there, if you go there and stand in the place where it was, it will happen again. It will be there for you, waiting for you. So Denver, you can never go there, never. because even though it's all over and done with, it's going to always be there waiting for you. That's how I had to get all my children out, no matter what. Denver picked at her fingernails. If it's still there, waiting, that must mean that nothing ever dies. Settle looked right in Denver's face. Nothing ever does, she said. I want us to pause to feel, not to think, but to feel, if you're willing, this particular onto-epistemological tension that rememory generates for most of us. Rememory simultaneously refers to both forgetting and remembering. And rememory is both doing and being, or non-being, both of this at the same time. In addition, rememory exists both inside and outside an individual's experience, thinking and knowing. It is the picture of what I did or knew or saw floating around out there outside my head. So then who is remembering? Really, can you understand this? Denver thought she would, but Seth knew Denver couldn't. And you? And rememory stays in the place where it happened. Thus, rememory is or becomes the place forever, transcending the temporality of past, present, and future. Because even a house burns down, the place is still there. Is the place then a being that remembers? Stay with me here. Take a moment to feel this head-spinning way of knowing, rememory. Can you notice how rememory generates different relationships between you, me, and place that carries our and your ancestors' memories? Morrison suggests that anyone can hear or see someone else's memory. It will happen again when you bump into a memory that belongs to someone else. If you go there, you who never was there, because where I was before I came here, that place is real. Have you bumped into someone else's memory in that place which is real? Even though it is all over and done with, even if the whole farm, every tree, grass blade of it dies, it's going always be there waiting for you. The concept of rememory challenges and defies our modernistic and thus colonial ways of knowing the world. A sovereign self is not in possession or control of one's interiority, mind, memory, or thinking, because my memory is floating around outside my head. There is no such division between a self and her environment, because my memory is in the place where it happened. Individuals are not independent, because my memory will happen again to you when you bump into it. Temporality is not linear, because my memory will happen again even after I die. Space and time are intertwined, because my memory will happen again right in that place it happened. And materiality and spirituality are not separate, because my memory, even after I die, is still out there in the world. If we, who never were there, go there, then this ancestors' memory will happen again across time, enter into our memory, and change our consciousness, identity, and embodied experiences. So then we have to ask, where does the self begin and end with rememory? In this sense, rememory is haunting. Sociologist Avery Golden reminds us that being haunted draws us affectively, sometimes against our will, and always a bit magically, into the structure of feeling of a reality we come to experience, not as a cold knowledge, but as transformative recognition. I'll say this is what education is. According to Golden, a ghost is simply not a dead or missing person, but a social figure, and investigating it can lead to that dense side where history and subjectivity make social life. As an Asian migrant American My haunted engagement with the memories of AAPI can lead me to enter a past that neither is mine nor owns me, but dare to be touched and felt, to ask questions about transgenerational transmission of memories. In this space and time, thus, I noticed that making a living and claiming my citizenship on this stolen land represses the memory of continuing settler colonialism in my flesh, born out of my Korean mother's body. Expecting an equal right in US democracy that is based on Black exclusion buries in my flesh the memory of Black mother whose children were sold away and whose children lives still do not matter. Writing my existence amidst this ongoing brutality of migrant children caged and family separated stores this violence in my body. I'm helplessly witnessing these violent acts without much ability to stop them. Yet I can be responsible. At the same time, the presence of my Korean and Asian body brings out the specters of my ancestors right in this territory, demanding to remember countless deaths in an aftermath of Cold Wars and other subsequent wars, including Korean War, which became the conditions of possibility of American prosperity in the 20th and 21st century. We, the dead and the living, the past and the present, and what has happened here and what has happened there, all coexist and are stored in our bodies. There is neither subject nor object. There is neither self nor other. There is neither agency nor fate. There are only inexplicable ties to what cannot be experienced or subjectified fully. These ties are what constitute a self, ever-evolving connections remembered and forgotten. To be haunted is to notice us linked, and the unspoken past of both here and there always haunt the present. We cannot imagine the future out of what we forget or what we're forced to forget. Rememory is waiting here and there for us. We as researchers, we need to notice how given categories and concepts such as race, nation state, liberalism, even AAPI became established as a given, and with what effects. Also in that process, what encounters, relationships, and entanglements were unrecognized, concealed, and forgotten to forge such categories and concepts, because realities often, if not always, exceed ideas, concepts, and theories. Oops, sorry, I think I kind of forgot to put my PowerPoint. So rememory questions the dangerous closure, completeness, and entirety of our understanding of ourselves, belonging, temporality, and historical progress, as well as our relationships to what can be imagined and done differently in knowledge production. So now I want to come back to the notion of invisibility by asking, can higher education address anti-AAPI racism? Asians and Asian Americans are largely invisible in many colleges and universities. Here, I want us to approach the invisibility to feel both Asian American Pacific Islanders' racialized conditions of life and what we as researchers do not notice because of our training in modern colonial scientific anthropistemologies. Asians and AAPI appear in statistical reports, publicity photos, and institutional diversity and demographics, yet receive little, if any, cultural relevant curriculum, programming, and service. We bolster student enrollment, selectivity, graduation data, and generate revenue through tuition dollars, especially from Asian international students who are aggressively recruited to come to the United States. When the Trump administration restricted visas enrollment of international students in July 2020, more than 200 institutions of higher education, as well as 70 higher education associations wrote and testified to challenge this policy, which is great. Yet, many colleges and universities do not provide them with culturally and linguistically affirming resources to enhance their learning and campus life. Asians and AAPI faculty substantially contribute to institutional mission of scholarship and teaching, but are scarce in leadership positions in higher education. In fact, scholars who conducted reviews of top-tier higher education journals and key education search databases in late 2000s found that less than 1% of publication included an explicit focus on Asian American and Pacific Islanders. Even in our current climate, there is absolute lack of official responses from higher education institutions on the rising anti-AAPI racism. This raises serious questions about their commitment to the well-being of Asians and AAPI in their campus communities. What I argue here is that unless higher education communities notice how memory of place is shared by and shapes everyone, in other words, how we are all linked through inexplicable ties to what cannot be experienced or subjectified fully, higher education will not be able to address anti-AAPI racism. And this failure eventually will weigh here and there for all of us, regardless of our perceived differences and distances from AAPI communities. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Rhee. That was very powerful. Yes, so we have a few minutes. If anybody wants to engage in a conversation with a comment, a question for Dr. Rhee, please do so.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This is Beverly Lindsay. For the presenter, I stepped away briefly to get a cup of hot juice, so I may have missed it, so please indulge me. Did you actually present a conceptual, a working definition of anti-racism? And if so, were you influenced by people who are so prominent now in anti-racism, such as Ibram Kendi?
I didn't provide like the conceptual framework for racism in my presentation, and I'm not necessarily influenced or used Ibram Kendi's work in my presentation, but I would definitely credit and have learned a lot from the established anti-racist work developed through critical race theories and those kind of approaches. Did I answer your question?
You provided a response.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
First, please.
Thank you, Dr. Rhee. I really enjoy your powerful presentation. I think you touch upon several issues that are very, very core to the phenomenon of anti-Asian racism in higher education. It's the invisibility, the aspects that they're pretty much used as a revenue generating, as an enrollment boosting, and so on and so forth. So I want to engage in the question of your thoughts in terms of why, in terms of this very contradiction of, on one hand, there is such a prominence of presence of Asians and Asian Americans in American higher education. On the other hand, they're so invisible. I am wondering whether it has something to do with what we call bamboo ceiling in terms of the lack of representation of Asian American faculties at the leadership level. We know that they're not underrepresented in terms of faculty or even staff, but they are represented, underrepresented at deans, at college presidents level. Whether you think that contributed to the invisibility of Asian American issues and anti-Asian racism in higher ed context? And if so, what can we do about it? Like as a community, how can we address this issue? Thank you.
So I think I have a sense that, you know, some of the audience may feel somewhat frustrated by, or you know, feeling uneasy in relation to the responses that I will provide in this conversation. Because I think for me, ways that we need to really do this anti-racist work kind of have to involve in so many different levels. And then the work of doing those different levels sometimes can actually create tensions, conflicts, and contradictions. Because I don't think there's like this one way of tackling the issues that we want to address. It kind of really depends on local context. It kind of really depends on national context. It also depends on, you know, international relations and global context. And oftentimes, you know, for us to make changes in immediate local level, sometimes we have to kind of really, I think, not necessarily involved at the kind of really larger global historical level of move toward anti-racism. And so in terms of how to think about invisibility of Asian Americans, I would say not just in higher education, but actually in society in general. And then the active participations or engagement with so many different institutions are somewhat, I think, you know, kind of already have been part of the continuing history of racializations for AAPI. So from the beginning of the history of particularly the United States, I think ways in which that we, as the country developed this concept of like who would be considered as Americans, right? Who are the citizens? Always been in contradiction or in opposition to Asian Americans, right? Through the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Immigration Acts that actually banned Asian people from coming into the country. And so how for anybody to, I think, claim citizenships in the history, I think there have been, you know, this kind of messages and almost a pedagogy of how we can perform to become Americans, which are almost antithetical to the constructions of what AAPI mean. And so we've been always, you know, active throughout the history. But then because of this kind of racialized condition, that invisibility had to be also always coexistent with our active participations in any level of institution. So going back to what you're saying, like how do we address these issues? And I think sometimes we ask our questions actually limit what we can do. And one of the kind of ways that Asian Americans have been noticed in higher education discourse is oftentimes using, the so-called modern minority myth as a way to go against other racial minorities' experiences and struggles, right? Like almost that's the only visible kind of a way that we can be presented in higher education discourse. And so we kind of have to ask the different ways of really looking into how we study race and racism. And I think by actually asking different questions and by actually looking into more or less relational terms, not only between Asian Americans and whites, between Asian Americans' experiences with, the dominance, but across and among other racialized minority groups. So like if we actually start to think about what are the relationships between Asian Americans and Black Americans, Latino Americans, or indigenous folks, even within higher education, when we come up with diversity inclusion plan, like how are Asian Americans actually placed in relation to those other racialized groups, right? Like when we talk about the activeness and prominence of Asian Americans in higher education, in what ways? And also because of that, like what do we actually not notice? For example, like one of the things that I saw was from the literature was that oftentimes when universities come up with different kind of programs and policies to include marginalized communities, those plans do not include Asian American students because of, again, the stereotypes and things like that. And so the assumption is that Asian American communities do not need those kind of extra, support policies or attention. But in fact, if you look into them, then you will be able to see the different needs and different kind of I think experiences that AAPI do. And I think it also goes back to the problematics of heterogeneity of Asian American Pacific Islanders. I mean, this is something that every researcher has been kind of really advocating for. We need to disaggregate data to see like how the different experiences of different ethnic groups, different immigration status, and the intersectionality kind of plays a role. So I think our research actually, in a sense, have to somehow bring all those complexities into how we try to figure out, really come up with new approaches to advance AAPI community. But at the same time, while we're focusing on that, that doesn't have to be like separated from other initiatives or efforts and work that we do with otherly racialized groups. And so those things have to happen like at the same time. And then through that kind of work, we may be able to kind of come up with different solutions or strategies. But having said that, I also want to say that all these things have to be approached in also very local level, because the relationship, let's say, of differently minoritized groups in Midwest, for example, versus in California would be very different, right? And so those type of complexities have to come into play when we try to think about, okay, how do we actually address anti-AAPI racism? Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I cannot stop time. So we need to continue, and this has been an exciting conversation. Today is the first day of the API Heritage Month, 1st of May. So that's also a great start to start this month. And also Primero de Mayo is it's Labor Day in Latin America, by the way. So I wanted to highlight those two. So thank you very much, Dr. V. And I will invite you to stay for the rest of our meeting, where we're going to talk about our CIEG. So an applause, please, and thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to move on to more mundane businesses. So it's a little bit hard to come down from such a great conversation, but this is what we're here for as well. So I want to, for those of you who do not know about our CIEG, I want to give you a quick introduction. And at the same time, we're going to have several presentations to basically let you know the state of the art of our CIEG. So the first thing I wanted to show you, this is our website, the Higher Ed CIEG. So I'm going to put the link in the chat for everybody in case you do not know it. And here, basically everything about us, what we do, you can find it here. Here you can see the recorded business meeting from last year. So we will put the new one shortly. Who we are here, I want to introduce to you the current board members. We have 2 co-chairpersons. We are on a 3-year staggered basis. So if you can see the date, so I have 1 more year in this role. Kudos to Kyla and Stephanie, who worked very hard to put the program together. We have a healthy stream of submissions, and they figured out how to patch the great sessions together and the highlight sessions. So those are our program co-chairs. Matt is our awards committee chairperson, and he's gonna talk to you and recognize who is behind selecting our awardees, which requires quite a bit of heavy lifting. And we have Michelle, who helped us with all the communications with our membership. She's gonna talk to you more about that, and is also our secretary. We have an amazing journal that is growing. You're going to hear about our journal in a minute from our chief editor, the Journal of Comparative and International Education. But I'm not going to go in details into that because you're going to have a whole conversation about it. I'm just quickly showing you, and I'm going to put it in the chat as well, the website of the journal. If we go back to the officers, you will see that the editorial board of the journal is growing because the journal is maturing and growing as well. And we work very hard to have international diversity. We do have an additional set of reviewers, and we try very hard to have folks from around the world. And Rosie will talk more about these. Also here, you can learn about our awards that we give away every year, and we'll do at the end of this meeting, announce our awardees for 2021. So that's sort of a big, brief overview of our CIEG. And in the website, you can read about our mission, but basically it's a hub for networking and exchange, scholarship, but also professional experiences, and have fun in the conference, honestly, which is also important, right? To foster community among us of anybody who is interested in the topic of higher education worldwide, or tertiary education as it is more commonly known overseas. So we are, I believe, the largest CIEG in CIES as of 28th of April, pretty accurate. We received the report of 235 members. Thank you very much for your support, for all of you who are members. Despite COVID, the membership continues strong, so we're very grateful of that. The memberships are calendar year, so if you enroll now, that means that you are a member for the remaining of your year 2021, right? So it doesn't go from year to year from the moment you enrolled, but it just goes from the calendar year. So it is always better to become a member just to get the at the beginning of the year when you are thinking about registering for our conferences. And you can enroll for the following year starting on October 15. So our finances are very healthy because we would be giving you a nice breakfast right now had it would be in person. But unfortunately, we can't. We did have a little concert and we tried to have a great panelist with us. But the good news is that next time in Minneapolis, we have enough cash to give you a nice breakfast. Let's put it that way. So hope to see you there. As you can see, there's some expenses, administrative expenses with CIES for the host of the website, awards, etc. But that has been pretty steady, our finances. We have elections coming up for the awards committee chairperson. These elections are happening in next month, so you please pay attention to those emails from CIES. Matt has been serving for 3 years, so yeah, thank you very much, Matt, for that. Big applause because that's a big job. Yeah, thank you. We'll miss you, but at the same time, we look for our new colleague that is going to help us in this very important task of selecting our awardees every year in coordination, working with the rest of the awardees committee. We're going to have time for questions about the CIEG, so please write them down, take mental notes. At the end, we will engage in a conversation. So now I'm going to give Rotsy to please go ahead and start your presentation about the journal.
Okay. The Journal of Comparative and International Education, we're actually going into our second decade. However, I took over as editor-in-chief not too long ago. Our editorial team has people from throughout the world. We just this year added a social media director, a book review editor. We refined our managing editor duties and production editor. And there's a lot of room to grow. Yesterday, actually, I started to think that maybe we need a translation editor, somebody who would be in charge of facilitating the translation of the abstracts. Because why not? Why should it only be published in English? So anybody who wants that, there you go. You get to create the job from the bottom up. So we did also this year change the types of submissions. We now have, 3 submissions, empirical articles that are 5,500 to 7,500 words, scholarly research-based review essays that are 3,500 to 4,500 words, and then emerging scholars research summaries that will be 1,000 to 1,500 words. And note, this is what we used to call the graduate submissions. You will need approval of your supervisor or chair to be able to submit something to the journal on this. And so the details are on the website now. We have a series of special issues. The one for COVID, which is summer 2022, has closed today with a record number of submissions, overwhelming. I think we ended up having something like 28 submissions, although I got stuff in my inbox today, so it might be over 30. Winter 22, our focus on malign foreign influences. Proposals are still being accepted for that. excuse me, but not for a while. We are teaming up with University of Malaysia to publish selected publications from their conference, of course, going through peer review. And then in summer 23, Pilar is going to be our special editor for Latin American Focus, which I just misspelled there. And we don't have a title of that yet, but keep a lookout. It will be coming out in the next 6 months. And then Sharon Stein in winter 2023. I know it sounds silly, but if anybody wants to propose a special issue for 2024 or 2025, write to me. The more we have in the pipeline, the better and stronger we are. Now, this is what I'm really proud of. We always talk about the westernization of publication. So these are the authors that we had in author affiliation. So this is the institutions they work in from 2018, 2019, and 2020. And yes, while the majority is still United States, we have these. This chart shows author countries that are about 2 or 3 publications, whereas this one shows 1. So all of these countries had 1 author submit and get published in the journal. So you could see that if you add it up, United States only gets to be 52%, which I love. And I worked on the ones that we have so far this year, but it's only 2 issues. So, but again, the pattern is holding with a tremendous diversity of authors, but we want more. We want this to be a truly comparative and international journal. We are working on improving our rankings right now. Our index is 4 and the H5 medium is 7, which is not embarrassing, but it's not great. So the one thing that we could benefit from this is if everybody knows about the journal, download the articles, and then 5 weeks later, down them again, so that our stats go up. Tell your friends and family about the journal, have them read it, quote the journal in your writing. This is like the most critical thing. If we want to get recognition in the publishing world, people have to read the articles and quote them. So please, please make this part of your publishing regime. The statistics, we're at about between a 33 to 36% publishing rate, although so far this year, our rejections have gone up, which that just breaks my heart because I don't like to reject anybody. But if we want to think about raising our visibility, that's something that needs to be done as well. These are, I took off of Eric for our top downloads. And this was the June 2020 to December report. So, I'll be running another one in a couple of months. And then these are our Google Scholar top downloads. And so you could see how the numbers are low and there's room for us to improve in that area. These are the reviewers and copy editors. And if you have, your name isn't on here, I'm sorry. I actually pulled this together based on December 2020 report. So as you can see, the who's who in the world are our peer reviewers. I'll stop the share. And if you're not on the list, it's so easy to get on the list. I'm going to put in the chat box how you could become a peer reviewer. We have a regional editor team as well as an advisory board. And so we're always looking for people interested in serving on those positions as well. And any suggestions you have for the journal, please let us know, because this is not a set in stone journal. We are expanding with the times, and we serve the SIG. And so we need to be on top of what the SIG's needs are. So thank you. And I'll put in the chat box the information.
Thank you, Rosie, very much. Oh, and now we are going to move to a presentation about our conference program. Kyle and Stephanie.
Sure. So, I guess I'll just talk about this first part, and then Kayla can talk about the actual program. So, Kayla and I have been managing the process of the initial submissions to the Higher Ed SIG for the annual conference, and then as well as the creation of the program itself. So. As you can see here, these are the submission statistics for VCIES 2021. And so this year we had a fantastic number of reviewers, 118. So thank you everyone who volunteered their time and service to review submissions. This would not be possible without you. We had 125 total submissions, and the breakdown is here, 113 of which were individual, whether that's mostly paper or poster or so on. We had 12 organized session submissions. In terms of what we accepted, so our overall acceptance rate is 79% for this year. And really, we were working around the idea that we want a high quality program that reflects the high quality submissions that we receive, and we also try to be inclusive as possible while maintaining, of course, the quality. So of course, you could see the individual breakdown of the acceptance rates for the individual submissions and the session submissions. I just want to make a few comments about 2021 in particular, just because this was such an unusual year. I mean, pretty much with months of lead up time, we knew that we would be in a virtual environment. And I think that created some anomalies. And so just to point out, it's interesting that the number of reviewers remained pretty steady. It was just slightly lower than last year, but not by much, which is fantastic. It meant that people were still willing to give their time and attention to this, and we really appreciate that. The number of submissions, however, did go down compared to last year. In fact, there was a 31% drop in the number of submissions that we received for 2021. I just want to put that into context that actually pretty much across all the SIGs, if I'm not mistaken, all the SIGs experienced a considerable drop in the number of submissions this year. Nonetheless, even though we did have a 31% drop, the higher ed SIG still received the most number of submissions by far compared to any other SIG this year. And in fact, we were the only SIG that actually exceeded over 100 submissions. The other SIGs were more in the double-digit range. So just to close, keep those submissions coming. We would love to feature your quality work in the program. And thank you everyone again for giving your time and service to review.
Thanks, Stephanie. We just have 2 slides here to take a moment to recognize all of the presenters and the work that was presented in our highlighted sessions this year. So because we have such a high membership, the Higher Ed SIG does get 2 highlighted sessions every year. So we were so fortunate to get so many really high quality individual submissions that really spoke to the moment that we're in, and that spoke directly to our conference theme of social responsibility. One of the things that we were thinking about when trying to decide who was in a highlighted session and also who would be chairs or discussants throughout the conference is that we really wanted to amplify those who are either historically marginalized or minoritized within our field. So you probably saw a lot of graduate students, a lot of students or emerging scholars of color in those roles. And so we did that very intentionally, and we're appreciative to be in a society that welcomes that. And we look forward to increasing inclusivity as the years come on. One unique thing about this highlighted session that's on this particular screen is that we actually had undergraduate students who were presenting research in that very first presentation. And you'll see a lot of other diversity of various forms, institutional, racial, ethnic, linguistic, represented across a lot of the presenters. So if you just want to click to the next slide, Pilar, so everybody can see both of the sessions. We were really pleased with the attendance at these sessions. A lot of the higher ed SIG sessions highlighted and not had 20 plus people, and that was a lot more than some of the other SIGs. So we really appreciate the attention and support that you all continue to give to your colleagues. So thank you for everybody for participating in our sessions this year. It was a real treat to be able to put them together. Again, really strong presentations, so keep up the good work.
Great. Thank you again, Kyle and Stephanie. Second year of great work and a lot of work putting these together. And now I would like to invite Michelle to talk to us about communications.
Greetings, everyone. So I'll just briefly review what's on the website here. And I've already put in the chat the ways you can contact us, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Also, the CEIS portal is a good way to get in touch with me in particular, or our email address. We have 477 followers on Twitter, 68 members in our LinkedIn group, 97 members on our Facebook group. I encourage you to tag HESIG in these different places so we could retweet what you have to offer. Okay, so I didn't put this on here, but I suppose I'll just acknowledge, yes, I did contribute to the CIES response to the US ICE policy on international students. It was a group effort. And so I encourage you to take a look on the CIS page to see what HESIG and other SIGs actually contribute to in response to that decision last year. Because we've sort of been out of touch this past year, we're not in person. I've been thinking of different ways in which we could amplify the great work of our HESIG members. So one of the ways that I'm thinking about that is through a newsletter, and I'm wondering if there's interest in a quarterly HESIG newsletter. I think it'd be a good way for us to acknowledge the work that you're doing, whether it's presentations or publications, or, you know, other things related to higher education. And so if that's something that you think we should consider, please feel free to send me a private message or just share it in the chat. And really, I think the work of I guess the secretary is not just to share what we're doing as a SIG, but also to amplify the great work that y'all are doing. So please definitely engage with us on our social media, and I'll stop there. And if there's any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Michelle. I did put that because I did wanted to recognize you for that. So for that initiative. And I just wanted to mention quickly that we have sent a few paragraphs in the CIS newsletter from our SIG. So that's something that also we have as a communication channels, but this notion of a newsletter just for us, it's definitely something to consider. Thank you, Michelle, very much. Okay. So, and of course, Michelle is again critical because I am not technological savvy. So, and so we need somebody with those skills to really help us get the word out and foster community among us. So now is the time for questions, comments about our SIG. I'm going to stop sharing and then we're going to move to present our awardees for the year. So please, anybody, comments, questions?
May I ask a question?
Absolutely, please.
Thank you. So my name is Mary and I'm a PhD student here in Seoul, South Korea. And I find in our department, we have a lot of students that are interested in writing and publishing. However, we don't quite have perhaps like sufficient guidance, you know, for someone to perhaps like match our papers against what the journal requirements are, and to basically just give guidance as to how to refine our papers better. Is there perhaps a resource in the CIEG or people designated to just kind of guide graduate students in better writing practices?
Rosie, I wonder if you have a first reaction to that question.
We do not have something official. So as a graduate student, you could organize something like that and we could put on a workshop. But what I like to do, and this must just be the motherly instinct that I have, is that when I do get submissions and they're not at the quality of the journal, I will give extensive edits to show the writer how to think about things in a different way. But I always entertain questions about publishing, but we haven't done anything official. So, oh, and Kayla just wrote the New Scholars Committee has had writing workshops. That's true. The dissertation workshops are excellent. The writing ones are also excellent. So that's an excellent place to go and take a look.
That's a great tip, Kyla. And I would like to add, sometimes it can be very discouraging for an author to receive extensive feedback. But I think it would be useful to see it as an opportunity to growth and learn, going back to the question that in fact, for our reviewer to take that time and care, we do it in hopes that it helps the author to grow. So that's one thing, as opposed to taking it a little bit of with resentment. It's not really about that. It's constructive. And the other thing that I tell my students is to read articles that are published in those journals, but not for the content, but for the form. Like, we focus too much on the content when we do lead review. We want to center our work in the literature. But I ask students, so look how the introduction is written. How is cited? What are the different sections in the paper? So that's another very big tip to learn from what is already written, to look at the form. And the APA we use in the journal and in education, in the social sciences, APA style. And they have the manual and they have very good tips about writing the first 3 chapters, because we always think about APA style just as the mechanics of how to cite, but they actually go down to grammar and punctuation, but also being politically correct, and flow and clarity. Great suggestions. And APA-now.org, I think, is the website. They revamped the website and have very good resources with actual samples. And again, it's not a reading about the content, but the form of how do we write in the social sciences. I hate to say this, in the US, unfortunately, maybe we should change that. But of course, it's very American-centered, everything what I'm saying right now. So, and this is we are in this location right now in the academy in the US. But I think this is part of the problem. And Rosie is talking about maybe we can publish in other languages, and the journal is really looking into that possibility.
Pilar. Oh,
Yes.
sorry, Stephanie.
Oh,
Go on.
no. Oh, I just wanted to also just jump in really quick and mention, because many others have mentioned it in the chat. You know, there's outside of the higher education CIEG, the larger CIES hosts the New Scholars workshops, and they set up. They set up, you know, various professional development events, but they also set up these small group workshops where faculty and students or new scholars are matched together. And they have them specifically for dissertation, those who are working on their dissertations, and then those who are working on publications, oftentimes a first-time journal article. And I mean, even I myself have certainly benefited from those workshops in the past, and more recently I've been serving as a mentor. So something to keep an eye out for.
Pilar, okay, or
Yes.
Stephanie, to build on what you're saying, perhaps this is a terrible idea, but would it be possible if we created a mini version. I think the new scholars, I did both the publication one. I remember being with Crystal George Mwangi in either the dissertation or publication one a long time ago. My goodness. What if we did like a mini version and it was a session or two? I mean, we have such a big SIG, we could always, I mean, this is just an idea, but we could always create a committee of a couple people, which would get more people involved to do something like that. It may create more engagement between newer members. I mean, I'll say what I'll say about Rosie later, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be this involved, like a dozen years later. But this may give more people an opportunity to, I'd be happy to be involved with it, even though I have no time to do it.
Matt, I love your suggestion, and I'm going to interpret your suggestion as I volunteer to chair.
I also don't want to take new scholars' steam away. That was my other thought.
So, yes, thank you. We are taking notes. Great suggestions. It's 9:30. We have 15 minutes, and we have a very important business to take care of, which is our deeds and celebrate our deeds. So, if you have more suggestions, questions about the SIG, please put it in the chat or email us directly. I'm going to put my email in the chat in a minute. But now I want to turn it to our chair committee chairperson to talk about our Ds, to celebrate our Ds. Do you want me to share the screen and we show the?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess it's time for a drum roll, people.
Yeah.
It's award season. The first thing I want to do, though,
Oops, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Is to acknowledge the fact that we have an incredible set of subcommittees for each of the awards. We had an amazing set of submissions this year, a lot. And our committees were very, very busy. So let me just quickly recognize, and I see some of the people are here. The first, well, the dissertation awards committee is chaired by Roz Raby. If it wasn't for Roz, I remember at the very first CIES I came to, I think it was Chicago in 2010. I met Roz during the higher ed SIG business meeting, and I asked if I could be involved, and she allowed me to be on the awards committee, and my goodness, I've basically been part of that ever since. Then there's Christina Yao, also on the dissertation committee, and Antigone Papadimitriou, Sarah Asada, and Hayes Tang. And I think Hayes joined this year. So on the book awards committee, the chair is my good friend Meseret Halu, and Crystal George Mwangi is also on it. And then we have two new members this past year, Annette Bamberger and Ahmed Baghdadi. And then for the articles, best article, we have a new chair of the committee this year, did an amazing job, Janae Morrison, and a student I get to work closely with, Joanna Abdallah at University of Dayton, who kept raving about Janae's committee. And we also have Michael Russell and Ruth Hayhoe on the committee. So now we can get to the awards. Thanks to all of them for reading and deliberating and offering not only best award winners, it's so hard to do that. We have so many great submissions that we often will have, what do you call it? Honorable mentions. So the winner this year for the best book award is Yingyi Ma with Ambitious and Anxious, How Chinese Undergraduates Succeed and Struggle in American Higher Education. And our honorable mention was Peter Mayo's Higher Education in a Globalizing World, Community Engagement and Lifelong Learning. Pilar, do you think it would be best if we ask people to share really quickly in between each award or at the end?
Well, maybe at the end.
We can do that.
Okay, thank you. But big applause.
Yahoo! I know I saw Yingyi here, and I think Yingyi just asked a question. Okay, so the best dissertation, and I don't know, maybe Roz would know better than me. Maybe this is the first time in history we have co-winners. We have Bernardo Sefredo Mirando, whose dissertation, Universities Going Global, question, comparative perspectives on the internationalization of postgraduate education in Brazil and Finland, with Joy Renee Hannibal's Finding, Creating, and Following Footprints. Ooh, that's a lot of F's, I like that. The integration of indigenous knowledge in Palau. And we had an honorable mention, Giovanna Sobrian Virasamy, whose U.S. National Higher Education International Policy, a historical analysis of policy development between 2000 and 2019. And finally, we have the Best Journal Article winner, which was shared between Annette Bamberger, Paul Morris, and Mary Yemeni. Their article is Neoliberalism, Internationalization, and Higher Education, Connections, Contradictions, and Alternatives. And our honorable mention was Ann Campbell and Matt Maurer, Clarifying Mixed Messages, International Scholarship Programs in the Sustainable Development Agenda. And I don't blame poor Ann. She sent me a message last night saying she's on West Coast time and she's just zoomed out. So congrats to Ann on her, she's not here with us right now. So I invite our winners and honorable mentions maybe to give us 30 seconds to a minute of just a little bit about what their different publication was about, starting with Ying Yi. We can't hear you yet, Ying Yi.
Thank you so much, Matt. Sorry for the technical
worries.
glitch. I am very grateful for the award committee for your recognition, especially Matt. I still remember I did my very, very last minute submission and you generously accepted. Without that generosity, that award is not even possible. Because of COVID and everything, all these deadlines just slip out of my mind. And so I'm very, very grateful for this last minute acceptance of my submission. I think without, I cannot express my gratitude towards the recognition. And I think I would be more than happy actually to share with the new scholars and the communities here in our SIG in terms of the publication process. So just count me in if somebody want to go ahead and organize something for next year. And as I guess mid-career to senior scholar at my stage, I do want to provide the kind of mentorship to the community. Thank you so much for your recognition.
It's well-deserved, Ying Yi. Let's see. I didn't see Peter here, but I do. Tell me if you're not and you've surprised me and just showed up. Otherwise, Bernardo is here. Congratulations, Bernardo.
Hello, so I set up some slides. I hope you can see them to present my dissertation. But before anything, I would like to thank you all for your time and dedication to this. And it's really an honor to be read by the people we are referencing and reading and who are inspiring us. Dr. Rees' speech resonated a lot with my writing process. So you have seen the name of my dissertation. It's a comparative and critical perspective on the internationalization of postgraduate education in Brazil and Finland, in which I explored the phenomenon of change in higher education in its political character. It's based on the qualitative analysis of 38 interviews, pointing out that in view of the mismatch between the agent's objectives and codes, institutional spaces of deliberation are necessary for internationalization to strengthen academic training and not educational inequalities. I have posed my dissertation, as I said, in a manner that resonates a lot what Dr. Ree presented about rememories, so I didn't know the word. And it's based on many statements by the Brazilian singer Elis Regina, who once told about her show The Cross Street of Time that the task was to show the moment of deadlock and the result of political moments that brought us to this deadlock. Someone asked in the chat, it's available online, both the university's website and on ResearchGate. And that's it. Thank you. Good Workers' Day. And of course.
Thanks so much, Bernardo. And Joy, I know I've seen you here too.
Hello, everyone. I want to also thank my chair and my advisor who's here as well, Riyad Shahjahan, who nominated me for this award, as well as thank you to the committee. And I also, want to thank my ancestors, the elders, and all the Palauans who were involved in this. This is a work over several years for me, and very meaningful. Dr. Ree's presentation on rememory was very much aligned with the work that I did, and during this time it was a lot of work with my mother in particular, and my mother actually passed away just before I finished the dissertation, and so it was a lot of memories with her that I was able to put within this dissertation. And so my dissertation is about the resurgence and resistance of Palauan knowledge within Palau Community College being an American institution, and Palau being a former US territory. And so ultimately, my research really is looked at the ways in which Palauan ways of knowing, being, and doing were present within the university. And in fact, this is actually a wall in Palau Community College, which shows the Bai, which is a traditional place of learning in Palau. And so this research really speaks to furthering and making space for the footprints of knowledge from Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing it in the academy that is often marginalized. So again, thank you to the committee and to Riyad Shahjahan.
How is anyone supposed to follow that speech, Joy? That is not fair. That was amazing. That was, Giovanna, I see that you're here also.
Yes, I am. I'd like to thank the committee for having taken the patience to read my work. Thank you very much for the honorable mention. My dissertation looked at U.S. national higher education international policy analysis to look at policy development between 2000 and 2019. The purpose of the study was to identify and describe the ways in which multiple actors have shaped national higher education internationalization policy between the period. As you know, policymaking in this country, so I set off on this path to really understand it for myself, share it with others as to how the complexity of how different actors are involved. And along the way, I found out the trajectory of policy in 19, and it was an interesting finding. I saw that internationalization at home had taken a back seat. So I'm very involved in that aspect since. So once again, thank you very much for recognizing my work. I really appreciate it. And I do have part of an article coming out in the journal at the end of the year. And if you want a copy, please feel free to contact me. I will be very happy to share it with you very much.
Thanks so much. It looks like, from what I can tell from my stalking of the participant list, that none of the best article folks are here, unless maybe we'll give them 4 or 5 seconds just to see if anyone just appears. And Michelle's done the countdown. We're done. All right. Well, thank you for that, for all of the work by both the awardees and the committees that did all of the amazing work. What a heck of a business meeting, Pilar. You really run quite a meeting.
Thank you very much. Of course, it was, I just orchestrated the amazing work of all the board. And well, thank you very much for being here today. We really, really hope we can do this in person next year. We will have the link to this meeting in the website, and there's our information. Any questions, suggestions, please do so. And thank you very much for your continuing support. Spread the word that we exist, and invite others to join as well. And again, thank you very much. And I hope you have a good rest of the day, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. I can stop recording.
Yeah, the party is over. Great job of putting everything together.